here we are with another episode of Hush Harbor and with our special series Without Women. And today we are going to talk about Lot's wife, which I know a lot of people are probably interested in. And I know this is one of the topics that we said that we could potentially talk about last time. So, of course, tonight, once again, I'm joined by Jamie Younger. Hello. And Nadia Gray.
Hello.
So, four of the tenets of womanism by Stacey Floyd Thomas are radical subjectivity, traditional communalism, redemptive self-love, and critical engagement. And tonight we'll be guided by the scripture, Genesis 19:26. But Lot's wife looked back and she became a pillar of salt. So something quick and easy, but we are going to dive in there. So the background to the story is basically Lot received two visitors, and the men of Sodom gathered basically around his house, demanding to basically get to know those guests, if you know what I mean. So Lot basically goes out to talk down the mob. He even offers his two virgin daughters, which, in this time period would be unacceptable to try to throw your daughters to the mob. Um, so the visitors, basically, who are angels, they make the mob blind, so they no longer could find the door to the house. So they tell Lot to take his family, leave, and never look back. And of course, his wife looks back, and she's turned into a pillar of salt. So commonly what I've always understood and what I think a lot of people have been taught is she was basically looked back out of disobedience. But tonight we're kind of going to hopefully turn that on its head a little bit and discuss it in a different way. Um, so of course Genesis only says that part, and it never discloses actually the reason for her looking back. And I want to ask you guys, do you think that she looked back from disobedience? Because as women, we know we always carry a heavy load.
Um, I do not think that she looked back on disobedience. I think that it was more so, I can hear myself. I'm gonna start over. I do not think that it was disobedience. I just think that, you looking back and you see what you have lost and see what, um, looking back at your past, I think she was concerned about her daughters. I just think it was other stuff versus to disobedience.
Okay. I actually researched it and I looked at it from both points of view. You know, as a woman carrying a heavy load, you're leaving but I think you can interpret it, in a variety of ways. But I think at the root, it's like she had two choices. It's either you move forward and go to the next path, or you look back and you stay. So if you get down to it, it's just like it's a yes or no kind of thing. Like we can play with the gray area if you want to, but it's like obedience or disobedience. So that's why I felt that she was turned into the pillar of salt, just because of the disobedience. But I can understand like her sentiment, like it's like you're so attached to the past, and that pull is it's strong. It's strong to like you leave something that you're so familiar with, so comfortable with, and then move forward to something that's unknown. You don't know what to expect. Moving forward, you can't see what's happening. Going forward, but you already know what is behind you because you've already been there. So it's easier to navigate in that way. So I can like definitely resonate like with that pull that she's feeling, like she's in between. So that's why I said like we can play in that gray area because there is a lot of gray area, but it's like, God is just like, you're either, hot or you cold. Like we don't want the lukewarm in the middle kind of thing.
I said, yeah, but of course I still had it on mute. So yeah.
It-
So, do you even think the command was basically heard by her? Because, or if they even really addressed her? Because, back in the day, they weren't really talking to women for any kind of authority. They would have just, talked to her husband. So, what do you think about that notion? Like, do you even think she actually heard the command?
I believe the command was likely directed primarily for Lot. Just considering the context of the narrative, during that time, women, we weren't really explicitly, recorded during those times. So I definitely feel like it was more so towards Lot.
Um, let's see. I did ponder on that on that once, excuse me. So I do think, that she heard it, for sure. It's like, and maybe that was her reason, like you're still debating within your own self, like, should I look back? Should I not look back? Even if, God is like, or the angel of God is telling her husband, just like he could be telling my husband something, and then I'm still like being disobedient, kind of like Eve in the garden. It's like, we're still curious creatures, we still want to find out like what's gonna happen next. Like the woman always ties up all the loose ends. Like that's what we typically do innately. Like the men, they're just like they just go forward. They don't even look back. They're just like, whatever, the whole house burnt down, whatever, we going. I'm just like, oh my gosh, my baby's pictures, oh my little baby's booties. We're still trying to tie up all those loose ends so we can have closure. And so I think that's part of it where she heard it, but then it's like you still want that closure. You still want to tie it up with a nice little bow and just be like, okay, I'm resolved, I'm okay. But it was at her detriment that she did turn back and it turned into a pillar of salt.
True. So, in the midrash, it basically tells us, even though it doesn't say it in the Bible, but of course, there's a lot of different things in the Jewish tradition, of course, that mention that Lot's wife had 4 daughters. So 2 were married, 2 were still living at home. So, to me, looking back, this means that she would have left behind 2 of her children and possibly grandchildren, because I don't know how old or whatever they are. And, of course, 2 of the women were married to, of course, men that lived and were, you know, um, I don't know why I want to say members, but they were, in the
Citizens.
community of Sodom, so, she probably was like, oh my gosh, are my daughters or grandchildren or something coming also? So, I mean, in that vein, like, I think even if someone told me not to look back, I think if my kids were back there, I might look back.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. That's a sense of loss, a sense of grief. It's just no way I could just leave my kids left behind.
Yeah, and that's true. It's like just like you were just saying, a sense of grief. Like there is a process to grieve. It's like and literally she had to choose that whole process within like a matter of, minutes or seconds, however long that time frame was. So she didn't even get a chance to grieve. So I think a part of her looking back was like, okay, I'm gonna look back this one last time. I'm gonna like get it in my head and my heart like that this is closed, but not knowing that there was a consequence for her looking back.
Yeah, and I mean, I also read this other thing that was talking about a Russian poet. She basically, wrote about Lot's wife and talking about like, how you used to sing in the square and you probably have friends that, you're leaving behind now. I mean, even something as simple as, you used to hang your clothes on the line and you're like, just looking back at all of those memories and like your whole community. And one thing about womanism, of course, is like the community. So do you guys think like even as like just Black women, that we have an allegiance to the community?
Um, let's see. An allegiance to the community. Um, I said yes and no. I think historically we've had to, keep things together. Like it was the matriarch that, kept things going within families, like kept those dinners going, kept, families together. Like it was always the matriarch trying to keep everything close, so it doesn't get separated. But generationally it's like at what cost, did we do that? And so we're thinking about like, she paid the ultimate price, she paid with, the cost of her life. But it's really hard to say, like the allegiance to the community because you don't want the community to be, separated or like or broken, because nowadays we see like there's not, that generational continuation of like the dinners, the Sunday dinners and the family gatherings and things like that, especially when the matriarchs pass away. It kind of just dissipates. It just ends. So I do think, she has that allegiance because, historically that's what women have always done. But just like if we're supposed to be disciples and fishermen of men, it's like we're supposed to be the fishermen, but we can't just stay with the fish. Like you can't just swim, with the fish the entire time. You do have to, cast it, cast your net, do what you have to do, and then you do have to move on. I mean, it's easy to say, but I'm trust me, it's not hard to, it's very difficult to do.
Um, Certainly, I do think that we have a commitment to the community. And just like Lot's wife, she illustrates strength of her community and family ties. So, like, she probably was worried about her daughters, like, leaving them. Um, and I feel like she was just probably looking for spiritual guidance and stuff, like when it came down to that. And when we look at even today, if it wasn't for Black women, we wouldn't have the Me Too movement. We wouldn't have Black Lives Matter because Black women started all of that. Even when it comes down to like the civil rights movement, Black women, they worked in the background, although Black men was the face of it.
Very true. And so, with that and then talking about community, it's kind of like, you know, even though we know, what was told to us, like, don't look back, I think it will be almost impossible because, when you do have that part of the community where you grew up with people and you've been taking care of people, like you would be, basically like you talked about, like grieving like all of that.
Mhm.
And like to know, like, even though the men of Sodom, they were declared wicked, they never mentioned the women, the babies, the children, the animals. But like as a community, since the men were wicked, everyone has to suffer together now. So I think it would be almost impossible to, divorce yourself from the community. Because, it's not like they have like huge cities like now, like where it's like New York City. It was probably like, maybe a couple thousand people, maybe. And like it's probably like somewhere like small where everyone knows everyone. So it's hard, like, Miss Bessie down the street, like now, like she gonna die, and you're just like, bye, I'm leaving out of here. So, like that would be difficult where you're kind
Mhm.
of like, oh my gosh, like I remember like I used to change my daughter right there. I remember she used to run in those fields, and like now everything's just gone. And I'm expected like, not to look at it, even though of course, we want to be obedient, but realistically we're humans and we're imperfect. So it's like, sometimes we fumble, but I guess that's I don't know, because I want to think it's like a lesson, but then it's like it's almost like a lesson that you have to be perfect and you can't fumble the ball.
Um, Okay. That's actually was leading into the next question when you were just saying, like, you have to be perfect and you can't fumble the ball. So, I don't think, God has expected us to be perfect. Like, I'm sure he understood, like, that, the natural part, like the flesh part is like, okay, this is going to be hard for this woman. Like, I give Lot's wife props because she didn't look back. I mean, well, she did look back, but I'm like, I would probably look back the first second. Like, just because I'm like, what? You want me to go where? Like, by the time I even got out the door, I would have probably already looked back. So, like, she made it out the house. She started walking. So, I give her credit for getting that part, getting that far, but it's not a easy thing to do. And I think God was, he did. He used her as a lesson, and that's why I think he turned her into that pillar of salt, because it's not, that he was, just punishing her, but also like preserving her memory. Like, even though she, had to lose her, that her life at that moment for that, but like her memory is still there. Like, she's the only woman in the Bible that Jesus is saying, like, remember Lot's wife. Like, there's
Mhm.
nobody else, that he's saying, like, remember. So it's like
Right.
almost like a memorial of, her sacrifice, a memorial, something to remind us, like, okay, like, we have to learn that lesson. It's like, we're not, he's not expecting us to be perfect, but we do have to learn that lesson, because if you don't learn it, you're going to repeat it, just like history. Like, if you
Yeah.
don't know your history, you're going to repeat your history. Unfortunately, like in the US of A, that's what seems like we're doing right
Mhm.
now, because we kind of wiped out a lot of the history. Like, we don't want to learn all of those things that we were taught prior. So now what are we doing? We're literally repeating history as we speak, because they took out a lot of history in our coursework.
But even like with like and we're kind of jumping around now.
Sorry, that was a lot.
Even with
So
like it's okay. Pillars, like, that's always a good thing usually because it's something that serves as a memory. But it seems like,
Mhm.
the only time where it's like something that's negative is at this juncture where she
Mhm.
changed into a pillar of salt. But it's like he could have changed her into anything. He could have changed her into a piece of dog poop.
That's what I said, or a frog. Like, I'd rather be a pillar of salt, like, hey, I could be there for like ages to come, but a frog, like, that's all I thought about the Princess and the Frog. I'm like, she could have literally been a frog.
Preserves you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then that's what it
It's
is.
used
Like,
as a preservative. Yeah.
yeah, when you're changing into like salt, like, the Bible mentions salt all the time. And
Mhm.
salt is the delicious little ingredient for our food. And, it's used as like, preservation. Like that's how they used to save, all of their food. You just like pack it down with salt because it's like snow, like no refrigerator. And, then I seen
Mhm.
something said, newborn babies were rubbed with salt to indicate that the child will be raised with to have integrity. Like, so even though we've always been taught like her getting changed to a pillar of salt, it sounds so bad, but then it's like, is it really? Because pillars are not bad. They're looked at something positive. Salt is not
Mhm.
bad. I mean, I guess if it gets thrown in your eye, maybe then it's not bad. But in all
Cut.
other references, like, and like, when people like throw out salt or throw it over your shoulder for like good luck or to ward off bad luck.
Mhm.
It's always something good. So I find that peculiar that that's what she would get changed into was a pillar of salt.
Right. And that's what I said. I felt like, God was preserving her, not for her sake, but, for the sake of others. And sometimes, like, he does, he uses, people as an example to get a message across to others. Noah,
Mhm.
David, you can name a number of, people in the Bible. And,
And
pillars, like, even in, you see in Greek, and, Greek history, like, you see a lot of pillars. So I
yeah,
didn't think it as, anything like negative or bad, because I was like, okay, well, those, they're still up. Some of them are still up there in, museums. They've been preserved all these years. So I felt that, that was like a positive aspect.
Yeah. These are divine interactions. Yeah.
And so I saw a quote that said, salt is also tears, anguish for the women and children of Sodom. So that's something that, people never even bring up or talk about, that, you have all these men, of course, because we're basically judging a lot of times the men of the society, and then we don't think about all the other children and the women that died that had nothing to do with whatever debauchery they had going on up in there. And so and then you have referenced the thing, Luke 17:32, remember Lot's wife, which is the only, I think, other time that she's mentioned in the Bible, I think.
Mhm.
So I had another
Yeah. And I
question.
think that was very,
What did you say?
oh, no, I was just saying, I think that's, noteworthy, even though it's like just 3 words, like remember Lot's wife. You can look through the entire Bible, like there's no other, verse that's saying like, remember Moses, remember David, remember, there's nothing saying remember this person. So I think that's very noteworthy.
And then I seen something because I wanted to know if the woman had a name. So in some, I think once again, Jewish traditions, she's known as Edith. Um, I can't remember the other name that I saw because I just looked it up before we started this. But another question. So how do you think at the end of the day, should we respond when faced with divine warnings in our lives?
Child, that's all. Child, I'll let you know when I'm obedient enough, and I'm just like, okay, I get to the other side, because right now I'm like feeling like Lot's wife, like don't look back from where I delivered you. That's what God is telling me. Like, I already pulled you out of it. I already delivered you. Like, that's finished. I'm trying to start something new within you, and I'm just like, hold up, let me just look, just the corner of my eye. Let me just look back over here. So I'll let you know when I get to that point, because that's a hard thing to say. Like, you could say the Christiany thing, like, oh yeah, I would be steadfast. I'll be praying. I'm not gonna be distracted by anything in this world. Blah blah blah. And when you're in it, it's hard. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not the same as actually just like saying it. Because when it
Hmm.
comes down to it, and those divine warnings, and sometimes we like in our mind we're like, nah, that wasn't a warning. That's just me thinking that. And really it is the warning. We're just not actually listening to it, and our heart and our mind is not open to receive it at that moment.
Yeah. I feel that it is important for us to at least try to heed those warnings. Um, like red flags, like we dating someone and they show all the red flags and we like, oh no, we good, okay. No, they didn't mean that.
Yeah,
No, we should
swipe
believe the
those
person the first
red
time,
flags.
right? Um, and so what I've
Hmm.
kind of learned, that we have to, I guess, try to stay fast and be obedient to God's word, and because it shows growth and it also protects us. So, kind of put us in a safe space, You can protect your energy if you try to follow, those warnings, Take heed to those warnings, I should say.
But I
Hmm.
mean, this wasn't one of the questions, but how do you think we even know that it's a true warning from, well, a true divine warning, and not just us trying to talk ourselves out of something or talk ourselves into something?
Me personally, I look for confirmation. This is something I do like in real life. Like I didn't research this or try to find answers. This is something I truly do. I look for confirmation. Okay, I saw it in a dream. Okay. And then if someone else mentioned it, I'm like, oh, okay, wow, someone else mentioned that same thing. And then if a third person mentioned the same thing, yeah, I know I'm doing the right thing. Or I know I'm doing the wrong thing, whichever one.
Yeah, and I think in real life, not to say this is not real life, the biblical life
Yeah,
is still,
we understand
it was
that.
someone's real life. But thank you. But it is at times it's difficult because you may be going back and forth with your own self, like your own consciousness. But I think you really have to like know the voice of God, like know what he is telling you, like know that like he wants the best for you. And I dealt with this a similar thing, and I just left a profession that I've been growing in, building in for years. And I'm taking a leap of faith, and I was like, okay, I resigned so I can move into a different direction that God wants me to move into. But it's like, distractions do keep happening. So you have to like be vigilant, and like you have to look for signs now, because like he will give you the signs. But then at times like you can just be distracted and like miss those little signs. Like if he's saying like make a left turn, and then you over here like just trying to go this way. I don't know if this is left or right on the screen anyways. But you're trying to go the other way because you don't want to listen to that slight voice saying like just make this turn. So you do like it takes supplication, it takes fasting, it takes a lot of prayer, just so you can stay in God's presence and like still hear his voice, because those distractions, they will come, and they will come like fast and hard, anything to like knock you, out of alignment
Yeah. And that's when we have to really
with
focus
what
and
God
quiet the noise.
do. And like, even though she knew what she knew, but mhm. Oh, sorry. And I was saying, just even though Lot's wife knew what she knew, and like I'm sure if she could put blinders on and just like look this way and just not look back, I'm sure she would have done that. But like God, just he wants to see like if our will, like we have to be available to him and like voluntarily just follow him. Like he's not going to force you and just be like, just put these glasses on, and I told you don't move no more, don't turn your head. He's not he's not going to force you. Like at this point in my life, I'm just like, just force my head, just let me see what's going straight forward. But he's like being a gentleman. He's like allowing you to make those decisions for your own life. So that's why it was so easy for her to just like look back, even though she probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking to my own self at this point.
So, and this is the last question, because we're almost out of time actually. So how can we ensure, or can we ensure, that we don't look back in the metaphorical sense like Lot's wife did? And is it a bad thing to look back?
Mhm.
Well, I honestly do not believe that it is a bad thing to look back, because you should reflect on your past, because you can learn from it. Is valuable. I feel like it's fixable. You know, you can gain progress. From looking back. You like, okay, I know I'm not going to do that again. Or maybe I should try this. You never know. Whichever way it go. And in Lot's case, I mean Lot's wife case, I feel like with her looking back, it was looked at as a form of disobedience. However, metaphorically, she was changed into a pillar of salt, and it was supposed to teach us some sort of lesson. Um, but I don't think that, looking back is a bad thing. Um, yeah, I stand by that.
Okay. stand on business. So, okay. So I do agree with, some of the things you were saying about looking back. It is not inherently bad to look back. If you're just like using it as a tool to reflect, like if I didn't look back at some of my poor choices, in relationships, I would have been doomed to continue, those same choices. So like being able to look back and reflect like, okay, that wasn't a good choice for me. And now I'm growing and mature, so I can see like the direction that I want my life to go in. But inherently looking back is not bad. It's just when you look back and that pull back there is stronger than that pull that's pulling you forward into, a new realm, like whatever God wants you to do. Like I wouldn't want someone to say like, "Oh yeah, you just stay back here in this, two-bedroom apartment," even though like God is like, "Oh, hold on, but I got this like, four-bedroom house, two bath for y'all over here, forward because you just want to look back." So looking back inherently by itself, it's not a bad, it's not a bad thing. It's just like I think it's just the action that's going to come along with it. So if you're
Yeah.
looking back just to reflect mentally, but if you're looking back to, turn back that way and go the other way,
Yeah.
then it
I
becomes
agree.
problematic.
You should look back to grow. You shouldn't look back to stay. And I think some people they get stuck in that place, and they get complacent and comfortable with whatever
Mhm.
foolishness. And that's when you know that it's definitely time to move forward that way and trusting, the divine that whatever happened in the past, it could stay there.
Definitely, and I agree with both of you. I always think in terms of looking back, I always think of like the Sankofa, where of course the bird is walking forward, but their head is looking back
That's
because they
mhm.
don't want to, leave anything behind. And on the thing, the bird has an egg on its back, so you don't want to leave anything behind. But as we know, we still have to move forward in our lives. So whether we want to or not, we can't step back, but I think we can look back at the end of the day. But that is actually our time because we have like 4 minutes left because we like to keep it nice and brief of I think 30 minutes. But
That's all right.
thank
I'm
you
like,
guys
we
again
gave
for
y'all
joining
the
us.
meat and the potatoes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And of course, if anyone
My
has
pleasure.
another biblical character that you want us to, talk about, leave us a message, send us an email, whatever else, you know how we do. Facebook, Gmail. I think that's all I have. Instagram. But thanks guys once again for joining me. This was a good discussion, I think. Right?
Yes, I
Absolutely.
agree.
Guys are just kind of leaving me hanging there.
I enjoyed
No, we just like
it.
reminiscing in our conversation.
Okay, well, everyone, watch our video and go watch our other videos at forcolorgirlswholead.com, and we will see you in August.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks.